What's good, Atlanta? This is the Blog and Dirty Podcast, where Dirty Bird is the word if you haven't heard. I'm your host, John Buhler, lead writer, fansided.com. Got a show for you guys today. I don't know how great it's going to be, but it's going to be a show. Obviously, we're kind of now in the second wave, maybe the third wave of free agency. NFL drafts a little bit more than a month out, so it is the heart of the offseason, but this is the time of year where we see what the 2025 Falcons roster could conceivably look like. So I'm very excited about this. Coming to you guys here on a Wednesday and everything like that. Obviously, just some upkeep here with the show. I will be on the show again next week at this time. And then I think we're going to be doing it, I think, in February, or not February. It's our February. Friday in April, we're going to be having a work conference potentially. We're having a work conference in Phoenix, so I'll be there. Probably come to you guys there on Friday, I think the early part of April. So it'll be Wednesday, and then I think Friday after that. But we're going to have plenty of things to talk about between now and then. So let's rip the Band-Aid off and let's get started with, unfortunately, some You Like That. The world has turned and left Kirk Cousins here. He is still on the Atlanta Falcons. What comes next? So I believe it was St. Patrick's Day. His $10 million became guaranteed in 2026. It was kind of like trying to understand this. It was basically like devoid of injury sort of stuff prior to him being on the roster for like the fifth day of the new league year. So right now, Atlanta really has no interest in releasing the guy. They're content with having him be the backup quarterback at a very high price to Michael Penix this year. They're also potentially looking to trade him. It also seems as though that Cousins is kind of being, for lack of a better word, a giant horse's ass about this. He took a lot of money from this team. Basically said that he wasn't hurt, and then he was, kind of blaming his poor performance down the stretch on that. Now he's like not going to show up to training camp or OTAs or anything like that. Is not going to waive his no trade clause until after the draft to avoid being put in a situation where he was with the Falcons, where they drafted his replacement in Michael Penix Jr. I mean, get a clue, dude. Like, understand that your best years are behind you. You're going to be lucky to be a starting quarterback next year. The teams that are looking to have you are only going to have you for a certain amount of time. You may get an opportunity to bounce back, be another year removed from, tearing your Achilles and everything like that. But you're on the wrong side of 35. You've made a boatload of money. Just be lucky that you're still playing at the NFL at a decently high level where people are going to want you. So I understand why Atlanta is not trying to is going to cut him. They're okay with it because between him and Penix, they're only spending 20-something million on a quarterback this year. The bulk of that's going to Cousins, and Penix is a little bit more than $1 million. Again, they can somewhat afford to do that. Then again, you let other people walk in free agency like Grady Jarrett and Drew Dalman, which make sense to me, but that's neither here nor there. I will say, though, I kind of feel like I can't visualize a situation where Cousins is going to be on the Falcons next year. I think it's going to become tenuous. It's just not going to be a happy place to be. It's kind of the same sort of thing where, like, Matthew Judon did not want to be on the Patriots this past year, and then he got traded right during training camp to Atlanta. We tried. It didn't work out, but, like, the Patriots weren't going to have a good season anyway. You can understand why he would want to get out. But, like, you can't have somebody on your team who doesn't want to be there. We saw that happen with Hassan Reddick there with the Eagles. We thought he might come here. We ended up going with Judon. We're kind of in that situation here with Kirk Cousins. So expect a long offseason where we're going to be hearing, like, a bunch of rumors and what have you of where he could conceivably go. I saw somewhere on Falcons Twitter, which is an incredibly negative place, that it would be great if the Falcons could recoup that fifth-round pick that he cost the team with tampering. That was not just Cousins. That was Darnell Mooney. That was Charlie Warner. But, we want to get some sort of compensation back. I wrote about this for fansided.com over the weekend, some sort of concept about, like, maybe it was maybe the weekend. It's all blurring together right now. I have no idea what day it is. It is Wednesday. That's why I'm doing the show here. But it was some sort of thing with how to get Kirk Cousins onto the Browns and them getting the 15th pick, which they could use to draft Shedeur Sanders. He's not falling to 15. So you lost me with that. But just the moving pieces of all this is, you hope you can get a third round pick for Cousins. Maybe you're only going to get a fifth. You got to get something back. But right now, you got to make the chapter. You got to basically make a clean break with the guy. You got to go in a direction where it's Michael Penix Jr.'s team. And maybe find a guy in free agency who's going to be a willing backup. The guy that I've been clamoring for a very long time that I think would be great for this team as a backup would be Jameis Winston. This is a very likable guy. This is a guy who's going to be in media whenever he's done. He's also a former college superstar at Florida State, won the Heisman Trophy, won a national championship at Florida State. This is a guy who's bounced around a little bit. Again, it didn't work out with him at Tampa initially, but he seems to fit with whatever the Falcons would want to do. Again, it doesn't look like he's going to go back to Cleveland. They've already signed Kenny Pickett. Maybe Kirk Cousins goes there. Maybe Russell Wilson goes there. You've got two former failed starters, or former starters, if you will, from the Steelers. I wouldn't say Russell Wilson failed like Kenny Pickett did, but they don't want him back. And let's just move on, kind of get through this part of it. Let's put a dude on a team, bro. Let's put Kirk Cousins on another team. Let's try to figure out where he's going to go. So this is a fun exercise I like doing on False Start with my boss, fanside.com colleague and co-host Cody Williams, where we'll look at draft picks, prospective guys coming up into the draft and be like, okay, this guy could be on one of 6 teams. Where do we end up picking? And we ultimately decide on what's the best fit. The best part about it is we never really know where this guy's going to end up. So I'm going to try this here with Kirk Cousins. So I'll put 6 teams out here. Let's say he stays with the Falcons. That's one option. Another option would be to go to the Browns. That seems to be one that people are really high on. The Giants still have a vacancy. I think that's another team that could be in play. He could also go to a team like the Steelers, who don't really have a quarterback. I think he's better than Mason Rudolph. There's even a chance where he could go back to Minnesota and back up J.J. McCarthy, replace his replacement, which would be utterly absurd. And then there's a chance that Cam Ward does not want to play for the Titans. So maybe he goes to Nashville. Maybe they stink. They draft Abdul Carter. They get Kirk Cousins, and then they move on. So those are the 6 teams that I think are worthy of discussion of where Cousins could conceivably go. Atlanta, New York Giants, Cleveland Browns, Pittsburgh Steelers, Minnesota Vikings, and Tennessee Titans. Of those 6, the first one I'm going to cross off is the Minnesota Vikings. Look, the Vikings have been there, done that with Cousins. And again, I'm not the biggest J.J. McCarthy fan. I think he's very raw, the most raw quarterback in the previous draft class that included Michael Penix Jr., Drake May, Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels, and Caleb Williams. I think there's a better version of J.J. McCarthy in college football now by the name of Drew Aller at Penn State, but I could be wrong. The Vikings owe it to themselves to know if J.J. McCarthy can play. If he can, then that's wonderful, and they've got 3 more years on his rookie deal with the 5th-year option to build a championship team around him. They could do it, but they haven't been to a Super Bowl since Fran Tarkenton played for them in '76. So it's been a long time for the Vikings. And again, I just don't think that they can bring back Kirk Cousins into Minnesota. I think he's kind of closed that chapter in his life, so I'm going to cross the Vikings off. The next team I'm going to cross off is probably going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think they're just looking in different directions here. They brought Mason Rudolph in from after his 1 year with Tennessee. That's a sabbatical, if you want to call it that. They're still looking at Aaron Rodgers. I think that's kind of where Aaron Rodgers wants to go. He's using the Vikings as leverage to potentially get more money from them. We'll see what happens. I'm also of the growing belief that the Steelers are going to take a quarterback at 21. It probably makes more sense for them to get Emeka Egbuka, the wide receiver out of Ohio State. But I don't know. I don't know what Omar Khan's thinking. I also think that maybe Jackson Dart's available for them at 21 out of Ole Miss. If he's there, I think you owe it to yourself to try. I think he's got a better chance of succeeding in the NFL than Kenny Pickett. And if it bombs, then Khan's gone, and then it probably costs Tomlin his job. And you know what? You can move on, and you can stop being just oh my God, Pittsburgh Steelers piss me off so much. It's just like, this is Stockholm syndrome. This is just Mike Tomlin's got you under his nail. Nothing's ever going to change as long as he's there, and nothing's ever going to change as long as Jerry Jones has a pulse in his body and gets to make decisions for the Dallas Cowboys. I'm done with it. Like, these two teams they suck all the air out of the room. Two of the biggest brands, they're sucking the air out of the room that even like the Chiefs and the Packers would occupy. Like, I'd rather hear stuff about them, but all I talk about is the Steelers and Cowboys on fanside.com. It's aggravating. And then I also think that they could potentially bring in Jalen Milroe. I wrote about this for fanside.com today. Ahead of Milroe's pro day there at Alabama, he had dinner in Tuscaloosa with Steelers head coach Mike Tomlin, Steelers general manager Omar Khan, and Steelers quarterbacks coach Tom Arth. Offensive coordinator Arthur Smith was not there, but those three guys were there. I think that's significant. I think that's enough to the point where, like, it's at least something to consider, because there's a chance that Dart may go 9 to the Steelers, assuming that you've got Ward going 1 to the Titans, and then you've got Shore Sanders going to the Browns at 2, or the Giants at 3, something like that. So again, I'm going to cross the Steelers off. So that leaves us with him staying on the Falcons, him going to the Browns, him going to the Giants, and him going to the Titans. I'm going to cross off the Titans next. I think that if Cam Ward really doesn't want to play there, then I think Mike Borgonzi's going to be like, well, let's just get Shedeur Sanders, or let's get Abdul Carter. I just kind of feel like if you're going to the Titans with where they are in their competitive life cycle, then it doesn't serve Cousins to really go there. He's just going to be a stopgap. He's not going to a team that's going to try to compete for a playoff spot like Atlanta was supposed to do a year ago. So again, there's just too many moving pieces there for me to really think he could go to the Titans. Again, I'm not ruling it out, but I think he'd have success there playing for Brian Callahan. Roster's not good. Roster's in a far worse place than Atlanta, and his career might end in Nashville if he goes to place for them. So I'm not really bullish on that idea for Cousins. And that leaves us with the Giants, the Browns, and the Falcons. I think the next team I'm going to cross off is the Falcons. My reasoning is, again, I was going to have them either 2 or 3 here, because I don't think he ends up with this team in the end. My concern is it just becomes too acrimonious. It's too tumultuous. He's going to not be a willing, good teammate. Really just rubs a lot of people the wrong way. Again, this is the mess that Terry Fontenot created, and he has to figure out how to fix it, or get somebody else to do that. But the money makes sense, but nobody outside of Flowery Branch really believes that the Falcons are going to go move forward with this. I do think he gets dealt maybe during a training camp somewhere. They're looking for some sort of compensation. Maybe it won't be in the 2025 draft. Maybe it'll be in 26, but like, Atlanta's going to hold on to him. I think they're going to try to find like the right place for him to go, maybe do right by him. Not that they should, but I just have a hard time seeing Cousins pulling another down for the Falcons, which is why, like, you got to go full bore with Penix, and you got to get a guy like a Winston to back up at Penix here. I think that's just. I'm sure there's another quarterback out there that could be a better fit for Atlanta. Maybe there's a guy who's worked with the Rams before, who knows Zach Robinson stuff. But right now, I kind of feel that, like, you gotta cut ties with Cousins before the start of the year. You can't enter the year with him on the roster. If there's dead money, who cares? There's going to be relief that's going to be had with him no longer on the team. So that leaves us with the Giants and the Browns. Team picking at 3 and a team picking at 2. I think you could really go either direction here. The reason I'm going to go with why I think it's going to be the Browns over the Giants is he has a working relationship with Kevin Stefanski. They were both on the Vikings. That was his first offensive coordinator coming over from Washington in 2018. Excuse me, got to talk a lot, and your voice doesn't work anymore. All right, there we go. I think it's really close. The Giants may be more of a player than you would think. Again, I think the Browns were a playoff team 2 years ago. They've got Myles Garrett back. They've got the number 2 pick. They could draft Shedeur Sanders. They could draft Abdul Carter. They could draft Travis Hunter. They could draft Mason Graham. They could trade back. They could do a lot of things with that number 2 pick. besides drafting a quarterback. Maybe conventional wisdom prevails and they do draft Sanders. And Cousins is like, oh, I don't want to go there. Well, you got to remember the Falcons are going to be fronting most of the bill. Like you're fronting all the bill with the albatross of a contract that Deshaun Watson is under. And eventually you'll get out of that. Just like the Falcons will get out of the Kirk Cousins mess. I just feel with the Giants that I'm legitimately shocked that Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen got another year. Like they were stupid. They drafted Malik Neighbors. They could have had Penix. They didn't do it. Like Neighbors is a great player, but Atlanta's in a far better position with Penix. Denver's in a far better position with Bo Nix, and we'll see what happens with Minnesota with JJ McCarthy. I just kind of feel that like maybe Cousins checks the box of what it means to be a New York Giant, but again, like I feel they're a little more desperate to get like a long-term solution here, which is why I think they might move heaven and earth to trade up to 1 with Tennessee and draft Cam Ward. Maybe they necessitate a trade there. Maybe they take Ward at 1. The Browns take Sanders at 2, and then that leaves the Titans potentially scrambling. Again, maybe we got to see what happens here with the draft. But right now, I think that the Browns, the fit with what they have potentially with Kevin Stefanski might be the way to go. So I think he's getting up on the Browns. I don't know what the trade happens. I don't think they're going to trade the number 15 pick with him. We'll talk about that here later in another segment. So we put that dude in a team, bro, and I'm done. The only way to chase that is with a slice of pumpkin pie. The latest makings and shakings for what the Atlanta Falcons could do at 15. I'm just going to look at this from AtlantaFalcons.com. I believe, looking at this, Will McFadden put together a slew of mock drafts and what people have thought to do here. So got to kind of keep this open-ended and see who Atlanta could take at 15. You've got people talking about Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M, Jalen Walker out of Georgia, Mike Green out of Marshall, Will Johnson, the cornerback out of Michigan. The first 3 guys were all coming off the edge. So Jalen Walker, Mike Green, Shamar Stewart. That's kind of really the bulk of it here. There's Daniel Jeremiah had Falcons taking Mykel Williams, but that was published about a month ago on NFL.com. And then you've also seen other names out there like Kenneth Grant, Abdul Carter way back in the day. That's not happening. James Pierce Jr., man, Jackson, God, some of these are just horrific. Walter Nolan. Looking at this, so the bulk of it is Shamar Stewart, Jalen Walker, and Mike Green, and Will Johnson. Those are the 4 names that I think we're going to talk about here. First off, I'm glad to not see James Pierce Jr.'s name here. Maybe he's going to be a great player. Maybe he's unbelievable, but he just reminds me of Vic Beasley, and that scares the hell out of me. So I don't want Vic Beasley on our team. Mike Green might be that too. But again, like he was on I think he won the Sun Belt there with Marshall. Again, very weird season for the Thundering Herd. Their head coach, Charles Huff, was kind of put on the hot seat. They won their league, and then he went to Southern Miss. Kind of sucks, and has really been dealing with been a downside of realignment there. I don't even know. I think Southern Miss might actually be in the American now. No, they're in the Sun Belt too. Their rivals are in the American, like the Tulanes and Memphises of the world. Like they're just in a very weird spot as a franchise or as a college football program. So Mike Green's a guy that I've seen kind of like a physical freak, really shined down the stretch there from Marshall, really showed up at the Senior Bowl. Again, I don't think the Falcons had much of a presence there in Mobile, but this is a guy that I think would satisfy a need here. I'm coming around it more and more. I like him more than James Pierce Jr. But again, the fact he played the group of 5 still scares me. And again, like I just want a guy that I know that I've seen that I can trust. And that kind of leads me to Shamar Stewart and Jalen Walker. Again, I think these are guys that Atlanta would probably take out on the edge. That's probably where I think they would go at 15. Shamar Stewart, people are saying, oh, he's the next Myles Garrett. He's next Von Miller, next star pass rusher out of A&M. High octane player, didn't win a lot in college because that's Texas A&M football for you. Really shined there at the combine. Really came on there. I knew about him a little bit at A&M, but like again, I think playing for defensive-minded Mike Elko was to his benefit. Again, I think A&M is trending up there. We'll see what they're going to do in the SEC this upcoming season. There is still a little trickle of doubt there with him. And I think it's just kind of more of like, you're buying like hype, you're buying growth. But again, like anything with an edge rusher with the Falcons, I'm just like, we're going to find a way to screw it up. We're going to get the raw guy that never develops, or we're going to get the guy who has been great that's past his prime. We just don't get TJ Watts. We always end up picking the antithesis of TJ Watt or Bud Dupree, or they just end up going to the Steelers because they kind of know what they're doing a little bit more in the draft than we do at this position group. But I'd be okay with Stewart, just like I'd be okay with Green. Again, I've been, pounding my fist on the table. I'm not going to do it because I'll probably knock my microphone, the clamp off there. Again, with the way this setup is, it's right here. Anytime I got the clamp, it just falls off here. It's really aggravating and frustrating and whatnot. But I thought Jalen Walker kind of fits with what Atlanta wants to do out on the edge. Again, he's kind of a positionless player. He's like a linebacker and he's an edge. He just makes plays. He'd love to play for the Falcons. And I would say that the Falcons sent a greater contingency to Athens than they ever had before. They finally wised up. Look, here's I'm gonna take a sip of coffee here, and I'm gonna get back to it. I'm gonna try to do this as fairly as I possibly can. When you are the NFL team in the same state or geographical region as a college football power, you owe it to yourself to know everything that school is producing. And like it's the same sort of thing in Ohio State, like Cincinnati Bengals. They got to know what's going on in Ohio State, because if they don't, the Browns are going to know it, and they're going to draft players out of them. You also got to pay attention to Kentucky players at Cincinnati as well. If you're a Jaguars fan, you got to know what's going on at Florida. You got to know what's going on at Florida State. You got to be cognizant. And I understand that there's a downside to potentially taking a hometown hero, if you will. I mean, Jalen Walker's from Salisbury, North Carolina. He's not really a hometown guy, but he played at Georgia. Because you could end up in a situation where you draft a guy from the college down the road and he ends up being Kenny Pickett out of Pitt with the Steelers, and it doesn't work out. But you owe it to yourself to at least know what produce is being produced just down the road, an hour and a half away. You just go up I-85 north, you get on 316, and you're in Athens. You got to be smarter than this. But Raheem Morris cut his teeth on being a really savvy defensive mind there the second time through on the defensive coordinator for the Rams. They won a Super Bowl. Really was able to get after the passer. Jalen Walker won the butt kiss. I don't even think he was a first team all SEC player or whatever it was, but like he single-handedly dominated both Texas games. He just blew stuff up. And I want guys like that in the trenches for the Falcons who just mess things up for the other team. So they're not in such great timing and rhythm offensively. So we can get off field on third down. We can force turnovers. We can force a fumble. We can force incompletions. We can get the ball to Michael Penix, the offense, and go. And it's not about Jalen Walker. It's not about Mike Hill-Williams. It's not about Malachi Starks. Because Georgia's been an elite program in college football for a while now. You owe it to yourself to know what they have. You don't have to draft him. You don't have to feel compelled to draft a Georgia player. But it's the same sort of thing. When Alabama's on top of the world, you got to know what they're producing. Ohio State, you got to be plugged in, man. You got to know what's going on. So I'd love to see a guy like Jalen Walker play, switch out his red and black in Athens for the red and black in Atlanta. Be one of my favorite players to root for. It'd be great. But, you got to go with a blue chipper, and I think he might potentially be that. 15 is about where he's coming off the board. That would make sense. The one guy that I think right now, Will Johnson, the Michigan cornerback, that really excites me. That's a guy that you can put in the secondary, play opposite of A.J. Terrell. Allows you opportunities to move on from Richie Grant for agency. Seems as though Justin Simmons might be heading to Baltimore, Philadelphia, what have you, after his 1 year here. Will Johnson, again, like Michigan produces elite players. This wasn't even a great year for the Wolverines, but like Kenneth Grant could go in the first round. Colson Loveland's going to be like late first round, second round pick. Mason Graham's the next Warren Sapp. Have him going the top 5. He's not making it past Jacksonville unless somebody screws up and allows Travis Hunter to fall to them. Will Johnson's going to come off the board a little bit later. This is not as good of a cornerback draft. But again, I trust the Falcons to be able to draft a little bit more in the secondary than they are in the defensive front seven. I'd be thrilled if we got Will Johnson. So again, those are the four players that I've seen come up on recent mock drafts for the Falcons. You got Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M, Mike Green out of Marshall, Jalen Walker out of Georgia, and Will Johnson out of Michigan. Maybe Michael Williams out of Georgia too. But the team's honing in on defense. They're going to be very defensive heavy in the draft. They get to draft the ingredients that Raheem Morris and his staff want, Jeff Ulbrich, what they want. And I'm okay with that. I'm on board with that. As long as the message is consistent. Maybe they feel like they're good on offense. And we'll probably talk about that, a little bit more here in a future segment that's coming up here in a little bit. But that's kind of what I think Atlanta's going to do at 15. And I think more importantly, this has become very consistent. Like, we're not seeing them taking Tyler Warren. We're not seeing them taking Emeka Egbuka. Everybody out there seems to think Atlanta's going to be going defense, probably defensive front seven, most likely on the edge. Maybe they go get a guy in the defensive backfield. But that's where the focus is. Just focus and nail it, and maybe we'll be okay. Moving on to our fourth topic here. We're going to blow the whistle, or are we going to blow the whistle? So let's blow the whistle. Should the Atlanta Falcons trade the number 15 overall pick for a high-end starter who can help this team win right away? I'm going to blow the whistle now because the only player I think you could do it with is Trey Hendrickson with the Bengals, and I think that the Cincinnati is going to try to retain him. That's the one caveat here. I think anybody else, it's too late in the process. You put too much time invested in drafting at number 15. And I will say, though, like, getting a guy who's a developed player who's playing on an expiring contract or near enough, or a guy you have to extend for a lot of money, I don't necessarily think it's worth it. Maybe Trey Hendrickson's worth it, but like, I would say other than that, I don't see it. Like, I didn't think Myles Garrett was worth it. I mean, he's a high-end player, but for the money, I don't know if he really wanted to come here. He'd rather stay in Cleveland. So it shows what I know. There may be other players out there who could check that box, but Trey Hendrickson's the one where I felt like if it would have been anybody, it would have been him. Again, his time in New Orleans overlapped with that of Terry Fontenot. They know each other. Obviously, when Fontenot came to Atlanta, Hendrickson went to Cincinnati. He's had the best part of his career, and Terry Fontenot's had a career. I don't know if it's been great, but some people think he's a bottom 5 GM. There's others out there that I think are worse. Chris Ballard's awful. I don't even know. I'm trying to think who else is. Joe Shane's terrible. I'm gonna get to 5. I swear to God, I'm gonna get to 5. There were worse ones like Trent Baalke there with the Jaguars. Mickey Loomis kind of running on borrowed time there. Jerry Jones. Who else is a really, really bad GM across the board here? I mean, maybe Terry Fontenot is the bottom 5. I don't know. The point is, this is a draft pick where I think you can get good value. I think you can move up and down the board if you want to. I think locking in at 15 and figuring out what you got and getting that edge rusher that would have been available to you had you been picking there a year ago might be the way to go. Because again, like, there was a run on quarterbacks and Atlanta took advantage and they got Michael Penix Jr. The first edge rusher didn't come off the board until like Leatu Latu or Dallas Turner in like 15, 16, somewhere in that range. So this is a loaded defensive line draft, edge rusher draft, linebacker draft. I think Atlanta is going to potentially take advantage of that. I feel very reluctant to move on from the number 15 pick right now because, if you do that, you're going to get a high-end player, maybe, or going to get a player. But you got to pay him a lot of money, which you don't have because so much of that is tied up in the Kirk Cousins deal. Once you get that off your books, maybe you could potentially do that. You're going all in. Maybe this screws the team up. Maybe the Falcons push for a playoff spot this year. Maybe next year's, maybe in 2026 is the year they make the playoffs finally. It's been a long time, man. It's been almost a decade. Let's just get it done, boys. But to tie a bow on this, I'm going to say no. Like, don't trade this 15 pick for a star player unless that guy's Trey Hendrickson and you can extend him. But the Bengals came out of nowhere. They were able to extend Jamar Chase and T. Higgins in the middle of the night when everyone was sleeping. And they got them there. Everybody thought the T. Higgins situation was cooked. They thought they weren't going to be able to get Jamar Chase. But the biggest thing you have to remember is Joe Burrow's in charge there in Cincinnati, and what he says goes. That's why you got to move on from Cousins, because maybe Penix can be that. And if Penix is that, then he's going to dictate terms, and we'll get better. We'll grow. Unfortunately, if that's the case, you are going to lose Zach Robinson to a head coaching opportunity in a few years. At that point, maybe TJ Yates, fellow East Cobber, went to Pope, I went to Walton, went to North Carolina, played for the Texans and Falcons. Maybe he's new OC. And we'll see where we go from there. But again, that pick is still too valuable. There's just not enough draft capital for the Falcons. You've got a first and a second. You have a fourth. The third goes to the Patriots from the Matthew Judon deal. You don't have a fifth because of tampering. I think you got like 2 sevenths or 6, something inconsequential. You have like 5 picks, but you don't have a lot of money. You just need to make a very smart, calculated pick at number 15. I mean, when you were picking around that range, you got AJ Terrell. And that was a smart, calculated pick. People were like, he's not going to be that great. He's been a very solid player. Maybe not as good as we thought he'd be, but like in 2020, that was a lot of value there. That was around the range where the Cowboys got CeeDee Lamb. Again, another great value pick. So yeah, don't trade 15 for a high-end starter unless it's for Trey Hendrickson. Moving on to our penultimate topic, we're going to do some further calibrations to our roster. It's Dr. Thomas and Arthur today. We're going to make a further calibration to roster at the minicamp. We're going to compete competitively in competitions and practice. God, I miss Smitty. But here's the latest additions and subtractions of this team in the second wave of NFL free agency. So I'm going to look on here with the Falcons Atlanta free agency central tracker here. Looking at this, moving down here. So we talked about this last week. We talked about Liam McCullough getting extended. Jake Matthews getting extended. They signed Leonard Floyd. They signed Divine Diablo. They extended Mike Hughes. Obviously, they cut Grady Jarrett. He signed with the Bears. Drew Dahlman signed with the Bears in his free agency. And I think it was Richie Grant signed with the 49ers. So I'm going down to the bottom here, make sure I got everything squared away here with everything we got. Okay, we got D'Alford and Nate Landman were not extended tenders, so they're basically on the way out. Moving, just working our way through this on the website here. Got Mike Hughes. The Falcons did, offer they put a right of first refusal tender on restricted free agent Ryan Newsel, so they can match any offer extended to him. Former Falcons cornerback Mike Ford is returning to the team on a 2-year deal worth $4 million. He was with the team in 22. Eddie Goldman leaves to sign a 1-year deal with the Commanders. Kind of done with him. I'm good with that. The same sort of thing. They re-signed Taquan Graham to a 1-year deal. That was kind of like the counter. It was kind of like one or the other. Wide receiver and Pro Bowl special teamer Cordell Hodge is back on a 2-year deal at $6 million. Ian Rappaport had that last week. Love that. Really good ethos player. Kind of feels like he's checking the box, kind of like fitting the vibes curator that Cordell Patterson was. Love me some Cordell Hodge. Falcons, former kick returner, punt returner Avery Williams is going to the Eagles. Diana Rossini had that. Fox's Peter Schrager, Ian Rappaport, Mike Garafolo, and Tom Pelissero, the NFL Network, had defensive lineman Morgan Cox coming over from the Chargers. Most recently, it looks like I think yesterday Nate Landman's going to go to the Rams. So that's from the Rams itself, kind of moving our way through here. We've obviously re-signed some of our former players internally. Inside linebacker Josh Woods is back. Offensive lineman Kyle Hinton's back. Offensive lineman Elijah Wilkinson's back. Moving on up, offensive tackle Brandon Parker's back. Offensive tackle Storm Norton's back. Leonard Floyd, Devon Diablo. Cornerback Heath Taylor comes over from the Kansas City Chiefs. That reported on Friday. Yeah, we're Condavious Street's back. Mark Fox, Mike Ford. Mike Ford was with the Browns. So again, That's kind of what we're looking here. These are all minor moves. And I'm going to take a sip of coffee real quick, and I'm going to kind of tell you what that means to me. I've been talking a lot today this week. I had to do the episode of False Start by myself and do a bracket because Cody Williams is dealing with some internet issues over there in New Mexico. We'll see. I've got to meet with him later today because he's my boss, and fingers crossed things are going to go good with that. With what I'm gathering from what the Falcons did in free agency, they're kind of leaving well enough alone. They've got guys in the team that they like, and I think that that's more important. They want guys who kind of know what they've got. Like if Terry Fontenot likes them, they're going to come back. I think it's going to be a good fit there with Raheem Morris, Jeff Ulbrich, Zach Robinson. They're trying to keep things a little more steady. I think this counterbalances some of the uncertainties surrounding Kirk Cousins, losing a team leader like Grady Jarrett, losing a offensive lineman like Drew Dalman, who enjoyed his time in Atlanta. We'll see what happens when he does with the Bears. This all seems about depth. I think for the most part, Atlanta's feeling pretty good about what they've got in offense. I will say, though, Newsels, we'll see what happens there. David Andrews, former Georgia star, former New England Patriots captain, Super Bowl champion, the nephew of late great Falcons former head coach Dan Reeves. That'd be a guy that I think if we don't bring Newsel back, maybe that's the direction we go. But again, like we got to make sure we got center right. And the team felt that they weren't missing as much for the price, letting Dahlman walk with Newsel coming back. Maybe they'll be wrong. But again, anytime the Falcons do not have a trusted center, it's a lot of Peter Kahns and Mike Person snapping the ball on the floor like a hockey puck. It was very painful in between Todd McClure and Alex Mack, but we got there. As long as the center position is solidified here on offense, I think the offensive line is going to be really strong. Again, Jake Matthews is a team leader, seasoned guy. You still got Chris Lindstrom. You still got Caleb McGarry. You still got Matthew Bergeron. Love seeing Elijah Wilkinson coming back. That's a big help for the offensive line as well. And again, these are all micro moves. These are all like little micro adjustments. The biggest move, the biggest signing you made was Leonard Floyd for a $10 million on 1-year deal. He comes back and gets to play for essentially his hometown team. He played for Georgia. He's from Chauncey, Georgia. Very good complimentary rusher. Again, I think that they're going to get another pass rusher at 15. Maybe it's Jalen Walker. But again, we have to remember that Leonard Floyd's a number 2 edge rusher, not number 1. As long as we're comfortable with that and we accept that, then we're okay. Really need to see what Braylon Trice can do, because otherwise that's going to make last year's draft a little bit more concerning. You know, right now the only guy we have left from 21 is Kyle Pitts, and he might not be on the team in 2 years. So again, like a lot of moves, and it felt like you felt like the Falcons weren't really active in free agency. Maybe they were a little bit more than you think. You know, you got to remember, like every year, a third of the roster turns over, and this is part of it. You know, things that kind of fly under the radar. Again, maybe the Falcons have a little more depth than we give them credit for, but right now, like we got to wonder if we've got just enough firepower to get past the Bucs and hold the Panthers at bay, and not let the Saints ruin our season there in NFC South play. I'm kind of done with that, so let's remember some dids. So my girlfriend is really into Real Housewives, and she's been watching all the shows. So she's watched Salt Lake City. That one's crazy. She kind of dabbled with New York a little bit. That show's chaotic. Now she's watching the ones from Atlanta, and obviously 2 former Falcon stars are the significant others of people on that show. So I'm going to remember a guy. I'm going to remember Falcons offensive tackle Bob Whitfield. I don't know if he's a good person. He does have an economics degree from Stanford, but I totally forgot. I was like, there's a dude on the offensive line from my childhood who was fantastic. Bob Whitfield, first-round pick out of Stanford, played for Dennis Green there in the late 80s, early 90s. Played for the Falcons from 92 to 03, made a Pro Bowl, was part of the 95 team that made the playoffs, the 98 team that won the NFC, and the 2002 team that the Michael Vick experience kind of took flight. So he was there, I think, for June Jones, maybe a little bit the tail end of the tail end of Jerry Glanville, June Jones, and then the Dan Reeves era. And that's kind of the other thing to talk about with here is maybe Arthur Blank made a mistake getting rid of Dan Reeves and bringing in Jim Mora Jr. Again, a lot of the guys we've hired outside of Raheem Morris did not have NFL head coaching experience prior, and we paid a price for it. So Bob Whitfield kind of is like a guy who was with Rankin Smith area to Arthur Blank owning the team. It's the same sort of thing. Like Jake Matthews had one Pro Bowl with the Falcons, with the team for over a decade, first round pick, kind of quiet, doing his own thing. Obviously, Jake Matthews is the son of an NFL legend. Bruce Matthews, his uncle, Clay Matthews Jr., should be in the Hall of Fame. His cousin, Clay Matthews III, pretty close to it as well. It just kind of reminds me of like the Falcons historically, they've hit on some offensive linemen, and they've hit on draft picks. It's crazy, but they fail on other ones too. And you can look across the board at players from, yesteryear, George Coons, Bill Fralick, I think that was his name, Hank Fralick back in the day. Jeff Van Note, Bob Whitfield. I don't know if he's ever going to be a Ring of Honor type of guy, but he played for the Falcons for a long time. And I remember he'd always get a little fired up. His nickname was Headbutt Bill. Just headbutting people, just a lot of extracurricular stuff off the field, kind of fit the Falcons ethos, and I kind of respect that. Don't know if he's a good dude. Don't know if he pays child support, but like he was a good player for us. But that's okay. Moving on to another guy whose wife is on Real Housewives of Atlanta. That'd be Croy Bierman. I know, friend of the show, Ian McMillan of Sports Illustrated talked about him. Like, I'm not going to lie, I hated Croy Bierman when he played for the Falcons. Very frustrating because they were saying, he's going to be the star edge rusher. Played for about a decade, had 23 sacks. But again, I failed to realize that he was an overachiever. 5th-round pick out of Montana. Seemed to be kind of like a glue guy, but very much a Mike Smith sort of player. I think he was here from 08 to 13. Kim Zolciak with her mid-tongue lisp, like Croy, talking like this. I kind of always felt that he was an ultimate try-hard. He just tried so hard. Like the guy would rip through his sinew to run through a brick wall. Athletically limited, but gave his all for this team. And I think anytime anybody does that, even if it doesn't work out, you have to respect it in the end. Obviously, he's got a very tumultuous relationship with Kim, and we'll see what goes on from there. But definitely a lot of blonde-haired kids. Yeah, that's just the guy to throw out there. And the last guy that I'm going to remember here, another frustrating player, that'd be Peerless Price. This is another example. Phenomenal player there in college with Tennessee. Played for the Tennessee Volunteers. Played for Philip Fulmer. I think he played with Peyton Manning and T. Martin there at UTK. Got drafted by the Bills, and it was kind of like the number 2 receiver. Left in free agency in 2003 to come to the Falcons because Atlanta was like, we got to get Michael Vick a receiver. At that point during the 2002 season, his number 1 guy was Sean Jefferson, the father of Van Jefferson, former Falcon with the Rams and whatnot. But Michael Vick was just not the student of the game at that point. He was kind of more of like, I'm going to run. I'm going to hand the ball off to Work Done and TJ Duckett and throw it to Algie Crumpler and Brian Finneran. And Peerless Price is the other guy. Like he was wide open a lot, or just was on the other side that from Brian Finneran. And I think, like, again, a name like Peerless, there were a lot of peers of his. Didn't work out so much for him for the Falcons. Had a decent career with the Bills, but pretty fantastic player there for Tennessee. You do occasionally see him popping off there on social media about the Vols and everything like that. But I think this is just kind of a reminder of new owner syndrome that Arthur Blank suffered from. Again, you fire Dan Reeves. You bring in Jim Mora Jr. You go in a different direction. So Price was only on this team from 03 to 04. Well, 03, Vic breaks his tibia in the preseason game versus the Ravens, and that was a lot of Doug Johnson that year. Then it was Jim Mora Jr. year in 2004, get to the NFC Championship game, lose to the Eagles, and Andy Reid's first team to get to a Super Bowl. And then he was gone, and they moved on from him. And then obviously each progressive season with the Falcons, 05, 06 was a lot of disappointment. Obviously Vic went to prison in 07, the Bobby Petrino year, and then we kind of get to the Smitty years and that. But I would say with Peerless Price, it's a reminder of just because you think you win in free agency doesn't mean you do. You are essentially garage sailing it a bit. You are looking through the bargain basement. And if you pay a premium for a discounted player, you get what you sign up for. So keep that in mind. Okay, not too bad. Yeah. This was the Blog and Dirty podcast. You can follow me, John Buhler, on Twitter or the X at Buhler118. You can follow the show on YouTube at Blog and Dirty FS. Follow the show on Twitter at Blog and Dirty. You can read all of my work on fanside.com. Again, I cover the NFL at large, college football at large, and mostly the Atlanta Braves with baseball. Dabble a little bit more there, writing a lot more of March Madness stuff. Can't say I've written an NBA article in a couple of years, but that's how it goes. If you want to read stuff about the Atlanta Falcons, be sure to go bloganddirty.com. You can also read stuff from our regional network team there on ATL a Day, the first place that I worked here with Fanside over a decade ago. Coming up on that here, so that's going to be a very fun, interesting show when I talk about being with Fanside for a decade. It's been unbelievable. But yeah, I've really enjoyed the heart of the off season here. It's kind of where I feel like I thrive. I feel like, even once a week trying to find stuff to talk about, I always end up talking for about 45 minutes to an hour. Again, once I get back from Phoenix with our trip here, so probably about 3 or so episodes, we may be looking to have other guests on the show. It's going to be the slow time of the year, but if you guys got any questions, you guys want to see any of my fan-sided colleagues, both on fanside.com, around the network, you want to see on the show, you want to have somebody talk about another team, I'd love to have them on here. But this is a very exciting time here with Blog and Dirty and with the NFL and the Atlanta Falcons. Hopefully we get some sort of resolution here with Kirk Cousins. Once again, thanks for listening, and this is the Blog and Dirty podcast.